pictures
Mm-hmm.
that I have collected over my life because I've been influenced by the images. And that led me to learn a little bit about photography, and then that led me to start painting. And once I was open, then my curiosity led me to buy a sewing machine and learn how to sew.
Mm-hmm.
I used to watch my mother. She made my sister and I's clothes when we were children, kids. And there was a curiosity that stuck there. So when I got the opportunity, that's what I did. I just bought a sewing machine, asked the guy to show me how to thread it, and then took off. Which, it sounds interesting, however, I didn't follow through and do the proper thing, which is to go and get some specific training. And when you fail to complete the process, you only can go to a certain level. And it's nice to be creative and have ideas, but the people who move on and really make the kinds of statements, those are people that got skills.
Mm-hmm.
And now I understand the benefits of the process. And when you don't have the skills, it shows in your work. Even though you might have something that's interesting, but it is not the total, complete idea because you don't have the knowledge. So, along with this, these people, my parents started, my sister and I, out in tap dance, ballet, piano lessons. And learning this discipline as it relates to the piano, I saw that these were really the creative people. And what they had learned and shown me was like a code that brought about the beauty and the form and the color. And that struck me to where I started the musicians, the writers, the poets that I really like, I began to copy their styles. So out of this, the swag and the style, it came from our people. And it's been transferred down from one generation to the next. And I always thought that the jazz music that we play, inside of that music was a code. And that code energized and inspired you to keep going. Only up until becoming a Muslim, I realized that that inspiration was coming from God.
Okay, well, let me start here because I'm about to walk you through. I see where we're going here. Let me just first say this for the camera because I need to ask you your name and.
Yeah.
So this is an oral history project. We're here. My name is Amir Muhammad, and I'm interviewing brother
Ronald Umrani.
And this is about the documenting and archiving the African American Muslim experience, both in Atlanta and abroad of the United States. So, Brother Umrani, let's walk through your life, part of your life, and we're gonna get up to, the part about what inspires you, how you got to where you are right now, and take a piece of the beginning and then use that to get to where we are present day and even where you see the future as it relates to yourself, African American Muslims, before Islam, during Islam. Where were you born?
I was born in Oakland, California.
To mother and father?
Mother and father, tell the year, the date.
The names? Just the names?
Maddie Ragland, and my father was Lewis Ragland.
How many brothers and sisters, and where do you fall in that line?
I was the first child from the marriage of Lewis and Madeline Ragland, and I have a sister, Anita Ragland.
Now, growing up in Oakland, California, describe the time period of what you can remember from about birth to 10, some of the key moments of what the day-to-day life was for African American, and at that time, what was your religious belief?
As far as I can recollect, I was born into a Christian family, even though my parents didn't go to church. But we were influenced by our neighbors who were Catholics. And my first experience in going to the Christian church was with my cousin. And quite frankly, that experience was completely different, spiritual, a lot of music, and something happened that really frightened me, which was the music, and then the row behind me, this woman, she started jumping up and down and fell all in the aisle, and that frightened me. And I said, okay, I don't understand. I really just didn't understand it. And I was taught to, don't create any problems, because I was a guest in my relative's house. And they were all Christian. And shortly thereafter, the influence of our neighbor, who was Catholic, we went to the Catholic service, which was quiet. Didn't have the same kind of singing, which I missed, but it was quiet. And so at that time, we started going to the Catholic service every Sunday. And from there, my parents made the decision that we were going to put us, Nita and myself, into Catholic school. They had a local Catholic school that was, maybe 7 or 8 blocks from our home. And even though it was a tuition, you had to pay tuition, my mother and father struggled to keep us in there, and we wound up going to Catholic school. Well, a year or two at St. Columba, that was the name of it, the teachers made a decision to put me up to, I think I started at the 4th grade. They made a decision to put me up to the 6th.
Wow, that's a big jump.
Yeah, it was a big jump. And I believe, I don't really know exactly what were the effects of it, but I know it created a little pause. But without complaining, I just fit right in and kept on going. And one of the biggest inspirations was the English teacher who asked me to participate in the classroom projects where I could draw. I was attracted to the drawing part. So I started drawing in birds, trees, and by that time I was taking piano lessons, so all of the music and the art really was planted, I think, at that time. And so on from St. Columba Grammar School, then I went to St. Mary's High, which started at 9th grade. So from 4th to 9th, I was at St. Columba, then going to St. Mary's. Then going on to make my selection of classes. I wasn't that astute academically, so I wound up having to take the lower subjects, which was the basic arithmetic. When I got to algebra, I didn't understand -1s, -2, the language I didn't understand, so I just shut it down. And naturally, I was interested in the athletic part because that gave you an opportunity to show your athleticism. And along with, I joined the school band, and that was a lot of fun. And I started playing the saxophone, and then from there to the bass drum, and then from there the tuba, learning all of the various elements within the musical world. How I make the connection to the art, as I don't know if I said this before, but my mother made all of our clothes as kids, and I used to watch her. And the sewing machine fascinated me because of its movement and what it did and how the end product was something that I could wear. And so that stuck with me, along with some of my neighborhood friends. Their fathers were machinists, mechanics, electricians, and one of them took a lawnmower motor and made a go-kart, and that kind of blew my mind. And I said, wow. And then as, you know, time moved on and I became a teenager, started going to parties, started going to other communities. The Latino community was very close, and I had Mexican friends who knew how to draw, who knew color, and that's where I first learned, you know, the balance of color. And from there came the music, which was the Latin music. That's where I learned the salsa, and just hanging out with these people who were almost just like me. Anyway, one Friday night, I'm with my friends, and my father worked for a contractor, a German contractor, who he had only 2 or 3 blacks working, and his conversations always was he wanted to get on the dump truck because it paid more money, it had more prestige, and finally his boss allowed him to drive the dump truck, which created a whole bunch of problems with the white workers, because then they began to say that the name of the company was DJ Immo, was using my dad as his pet. And so that went on and on and on. And many conversations at dinner about whether or not he was going to work, because it was contracting work, and when it rained, no work. And turns out my father was a hope-to-die horse player. So when it rained, he was at the racetrack. And from that, he would take us to state fairs. And little did I realize that not only was it entertainment, but it was because State Fair had a racetrack, so that enabled him to play the horses. As I said, he was a hope to die horse player. And many arguments, many fights over him gambling. And finally, actually, it was my stepfather. His father died, and he was in Chicago, I believe. Yeah, he was in Chicago, so he had to go back to the funeral because his father had left him some money. So he goes back to Chicago, gets the money, come back, and then his thing was he wanted to go to Detroit to buy a car off of the line. And he and my oldest stepbrother, they went to Detroit and actually walked down and selected the color. It was a convertible, the upholstery, the whole thing. And they drove that car from Detroit all the way back to California. So that was a big deal in our family. In the meantime, running with my friends, we messed around, and one Friday night, I'm stealing hubcaps for a car that was given to my father. Well, he bought it actually, and the guy he worked for made these cars because he bought them from the military surplus, and he would also buy cattle that would be slaughtered and make that meat available to all of his employees. A nice guy. I mean, generous in that sense. And in this car, wild and crazy, and not paying attention and not doing what I know that I should have been doing, I mess around and somebody hears these hubcaps coming off the car. They call the police. Boom. Police stop everybody, and they're going to take all of the friends that had ridden with me to jail. And I said, officer, these guys, they didn't have anything to do with this. You know, I snuck out of a party and I came and I did it. So he let them go, took me to the juvenile home. Okay, so now this experience gave me an opportunity to really reflect on, okay, what in the world is going on with you? And now I'm thinking about what is my mother and father going, because they're going to be notified. And sure enough, they put me in the cell, had to sleep on the floor, and the next morning I could hear the door opening, woke me up, and as I looked out of the jail door, I could see my mother and father walking in. And so that really shook me up to the point that, okay, you have crossed the line. So sure enough, when it came time for me to meet them, my mother was crying, and my father just, he had a look about him that he could actually look through you. And so he says, well, I hope your curiosity has been satisfied. This is what happens when you're careless and you're neglectful. And I just had to drop my hand. So, anyway, they transferred us from the juvenile home and we went to a bigger facility out in San Leandro. And it was explained to me that, well, the probation officers are now going to go and talk to the brothers at your school. And there is a possibility that you could be on your way to the California Youth Authority. It just depends on what they have to say. Okay, so I think I was in jail for like 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. And when it came time for me to go to court, they let me off because the brothers had said, yeah, this is a good kid, you know. And so that made me stop and think and reflect on all of the things that my parents had tried to put into me, and then I would do something stupid. Okay, so
now your age, you're in your teenage years,
yeah,
and let's speak on, okay, so you go through that experience. Now, by this time, are Muslims around, African American Muslims?
not
Not at this time.
Not at this time. I'm mostly around my family.
Okay.
My best friends were my cousins.
Okay.
But in going in that environment, that's where I learned the sex.
Yeah.
I learned about the weed.
Yeah.
I learned about the things that I perceived to be fun, even though I knew that if you do this, you have to pay the consequences.
Yes.
So I've been torn for a long time on being a good front, but then being sneaky and doing stuff behind their back.
Exactly.
So,
what? Now, what time? When did you? So you went through high school.
Went through high school. Didn't have the confidence to entertain going to college.
Mm-hmm.
So I opted to get a job working at the Oakland airport.
Okay.
And working at the Oakland airport, I felt comfortable in that environment because I used to draw airplanes all the time. All the time. So I leaned toward airplanes and being in that environment, and I kind of understood the language. And when the job played out, I went to Los Angeles to stay with my cousins, and back again into that environment, sex, drugs. We went to a party one weekend, and around 1 or 2 o'clock, we are on our way home. We had a little house that was in the back of a main house. And when we drove up, there were like 7 police cars in the driveway. So we were trying to figure out what's going on. So we get out, and as we are walking toward our little apartment in the back, the lady who owned the front house, she said, there they are, those 2 right there. So we were arrested and taken to jail. And I said to myself, man, what in the world is going on? Now I don't know what's really happening. And I'm hearing all kinds of stories, and not understanding what's happening. And then that was my first experience in seeing a guy come down off of heroin, and all night long had dry heaves. And what this was, just a stark reality check. So I've had that consciousness all the time, but not really stepping out and saying, okay, I'm gonna make up my mind to go in this direction. All right. One of the guy who bunked underneath me, he says, well, they can only legally hold you for 72 hours. And if they don't have a case, if the district attorney doesn't put a case together, then they're going to let you go. Well, I believe part of it, and then I didn't know. And so sure enough, in 72 hours, they let me go. I got out of Los Angeles. At that time it was called the Glass House. I went home, I packed my bags, and I got on the Greyhound bus coming back to Oakland. When I get back to Oakland, the next day I got on the bus and went down, I joined the Air Force. And from that, you know, things was really moving really fast. And when I finally realized what I had done, it was too late for me to turn around. And so I said, okay, you signed up for 4 years, so now you got to deal with it. So I'm going to make the best of this. And at that time, I mean, shortly after that, I went through my basic training, and then I got my technical school was in New Illinois. And that's when I met the first Muslim.
Okay.
I met these two guys who had the long overcoats, the bow ties, and looking at them and listening to what they were saying, I thought, these cats must be from the moon or something, because the language was over my head. And every evening they would come by the barracks and we would all sit around and just talk. And then shortly thereafter they graduated from school, and I got my permanent station. And when I get to my permanent station, which is Lincoln Air Force Base, I meet another brother who's a Muslim. And so the conversations that we had, you know, I didn't really go all into it, but some parts of that language stuck with me. And I meet a girl I was stationed in Lincoln, Nebraska. I meet a girl, she gets pregnant. And then from there, she has another baby before I get out of the service. And when it comes time for me to get out of the service, you know, I said, okay, I'm going to send for you. And I get home, I drive back to California with my first child with the intentions of sending for her once I get a job and that sort of thing. And when she finally comes, 3 months after that, she comes, and we're living above in a little studio apartment that my parents had built into a garage, over the garage, detached garage. And my next brush with people from the Nation of Islam was high school friends that I had met at football games and parties that would come by on the weekend to invite me to the temple. And so partying on Friday night, man, next week, that went on for like 2 or 3 months. And so we moved from the apartment, we get a house, and my wife, the brothers are bringing the paper by, and she's buying the paper. And this went on for another 2 months or so. And one night I'm at the house by myself. 2 or 3 papers are on the dining room table. And so I said, let me see what this cat is talking about. Because the do for self, the one-liners, they stuck with me. We need our own. We need hospitals. We need jobs. So I started reading the Messenger's centerfold. And it was like he was talking to me. And I was answering the question. We need our own, we need do for self. And I said, yeah, that's true. Because that's what my father had put that in me. My family were business people. So my cousin gets me a job working at that time for Kenny's Shoe Store as a stock boy. And then from stocking the shoes, I became a salesman. And then from that, they promoted me to assistant manager, my own store. And the plan was that you work here and you continue on doing well, we want you to have your own store. So I said, okay. Well, the word has spread out in the Bay Area, in Oakland, as a matter of fact, that this guy was a pretty good shoe salesman. And the top shoe store in Oakland asked if you would come and interview to come and work there. Well, you know, that was like getting an invitation to play in the NBA. More money, more prestige. And so I said, yeah, okay. Well, before I got the opportunity to go there, I was working at like the second under the first class place, which the guy who sold the shoes to them, he was an agent for one of the big shoe factories. And at the same time, the opening comes where I can go and work at Charles Cushing's, which was the #1 shoe store in Oakland. And go there, go through the training, and I like it because, you know, I could sell shoes kind of naturally, and I enjoyed that. And so one day I go on my lunch break and I'm sitting at the counter at Cress's, and a flash comes over the radio that Martin Luther King has just been assassinated. And I said, what? Now, I'm getting a little ahead of the story because before all of this transpired, I didn't tell you that while I was in the service, or before I came into the service, Bobby Seale and my stepfather were Hope to Die horse players. And Bobby Seale was over my house every night, handicapping the horses. Because at that time, he was trying to be a stand-up comedian at the most popular, you know, sports bar. And many conversations we had about Islam, about Mao Zedong revolution, and Huey Newton was a frequent person visiting my cousin because my cousin was one of the big weed sellers. And so I got a chance to really brush elbows with the, you know, not personally run with them, but I knew them, they knew me. And out of those meetings came the Black Panther Party. And I didn't tell you that my roommate in the Air Force was John Seale, Bobby's brother. For 4 years. John Seale and I were like that. He's passed now. And by the way, that was my third brush with people of the Islamic faith because they had Muslims that were stationed at Lincoln Air Force Base. They were in a different squadron than I was. and we would talk, but it was just casual. Hey, how you doing, brother? And I always checked the demeanor of these brothers. It was always gentle and peaceful, and that stuck. Well, 4 years come and go. I get out of, now I'm getting ready to go home because my airplane had won what is called an R&R, to where you can go for 5 days to California. So I was due to fly to March Air Force Base in California. Then I was to catch the Greyhound bus to go to the Bay Area and be back to catch the plane to come back to Lincoln. Well, I get on the plane thinking that, okay, I'm gonna have some fun for the weekend and I'm gonna rip and run and all that. And the plane takes off, and as we're going down the runway, the doggone number 3 propeller blows off of the engine and slices through the fuselage. Flames. And now we had just reached rotation where we were getting ready to take off. And the plane slams down on the runway and we slide down the runway. And before we got on the plane, they gave us all count off the odds, the evens. The odds go out this door, evens go out that door. And when the propeller sliced through the fuselage and produced all this fire, everybody panicked. And I especially did because I was afraid that the plane was going to blow up. And so when I tried to get out of my safety belt, unleash the safety belt, by the way, we all had on parachutes. So finally I unleash the safety belt and I'm running because I'm up. I forget if I was out or even, but the door was jammed, and I said, "Oh my God, what's going on here, man?" And so voices are talking to me all the time and saying, "Yeah, this is dangerous, but you ain't gonna die today." And I said, "Yeah, you're right." And I jump up and run to the door and kick the door because it was jammed. I'm the first one off the plane, out of the airplane, onto the wing. Plane is sitting up like this. The wing is like that, on fire. And so I run and I stop in the middle of the wing because the voice says, "Hey man, you done ran off and left these guys. You gotta turn." And so when I turned around to start running back, everybody said, "No, we're okay, go ahead. All right, so when I get to the edge of the wing, another voice tells me, "Do not jump off the wing. Sit down and then grab, turn around, and then cut the distance from the height you were." Everybody who didn't do that broke their arms, backs, their legs. And so for, a week I was in the hospital, and then the doctor told me, he says, "Nothing wrong with you, going back to work, going back to your squadron." Well, that's what I did. And then that happened in 1961. And then I went on, did my 4 years, and Kennedy then extended all servicemen because Castro had put Russian missiles in Cuba. So he extended everybody for another 9 months. Well, I did that, finally get out, and then come home, and then start the shoes, and then go to Cresses, and then Martin Luther King was killed, and then the guy who worked for Goldman said, and as a result of that, riots happened all over the United States. And it turned out that the Fireman's Fund Insurance Company, they had, the subsidiary was American Express. And they put their minds together and said, the thing that we can do to stop all this burning is start giving it, these black people some money. and open up entrepreneur opportunities. And so the guy told us, why don't you open up a shoe store? And I said, yeah. And so this is the deal. Put together a proposal, and you have to be turned down by 3 banks. And once you get turned down by 3 banks, then you're really open to get a fund by a guarantee by the SBA. Well, sure enough, that's what happened. We were turned down, but the SBA didn't have anything to say. So I said, well, later for it. I went out from then and told the guy who I was working with, we're gonna start our own shoe store, and we're gonna raise our own money. I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna start talking to people. At that time, I read a book called 20 Million Negroes, $20 Billion. And with it, what was inside of that the Asians run the grocery stores in our community, and just the light went on. All reading the messengers, centerfolds, my grandmother, my grandfather, looking at our history as a family, doing business, it all came together. And that provided me with the energy and the creativity to go and talk to anybody I saw. I'd say, hey, this is what we're trying to do, man. We're trying to, at that time, they were building a mall out in East Oakland. And I said, we want to open up the first black shoe store. And the meeting is going to be held at my house on this day. And people began to come to these meetings. And I was able to gather my associate friends who had became close by that time. We formulated a corporation, and one was the secretary, and one was the president. And sure enough, we went to Fireman's Fund. Fireman's Fund gave SBA the guarantee that they would loan us the $25,000 if the SBA would guarantee it. And they said, yeah. We got the loan. Just before we got the loan, I've been a collector, curious all the time. I'm at flea markets and yard sales all the time. I look in the flea market paper, and here is an 1910 fire truck. So I called the CEO of American Express. By that time, we had become really close, and said that I would like to get this fire truck and use it as a prop, because that was going to be a fire engine to attract the kids, and I built different stands for the shoes to sit all over. It was beautiful. Sure enough, they went and bought the truck, brought it to the mall, put it inside, and then we built it around and then closed it, and it blew people's mind. How in the world did you get this fire truck in here? And that became a story. Well, the shareholders stopped coming to help with the sweeping and painting and all of that. And I kind of pissed them off by really just giving them, how are you going to invest in something you don't want to work? And at the same time, the Muslim brothers from the FOI were coming in the store. And they were explaining to me, this is what you do if you're not having any cooperation from them. What the messenger does, we take these papers and we go door to door. Why don't you let me take some shoes, put them in a suitcase, and I'll take the shoes door to door with me. The light goes on. Yeah, that's a great idea. I started that, and now naturally they're inviting me to come to the temple, and I'm saying, yeah, you know, let me get this out of the way and all, and I promise you, I will go to the temple. Man, the word now is out that Ronald has allowed the Muslims, because now I let them put the paper in the shoe store, the bean pies in the shoe store, and now the talk is Ronald has given the store over to the Nation of Islam. And that caused a firestorm. So I said, oh, okay. Well, they go to the bank where we banked, and they talk to the manager and get the manager to freeze our bank account. Because the manager of the shoe store has now turned over the shoe store to the Nation of Islam. And their story was convincingly enough for him to freeze our bank account. So I said, okay. All right, we continue to sell the shoes. The secretary of the corporation that we formulated and I were close. And we had became friends with another Italian shoe store owner in San Francisco, where we were buying his overruns, and that represented our men's section. So we had children's shoes, and he had women's and men's. So that made us a well-rounded shoe store. And so he then began to tell me, he says, you're coming over here buying my overruns. He says, it's real simple. Why don't you do what I do? Get on a plane, fly to England, and have your own shoes made with your own sock lining in them. Bling, light goes on. Yeah. So one of the persons in our group had access to some tickets. So I got a ticket, and the next thing you know, I'm in England. And as I said, you know, I've been collecting and buying and selling. I bought some, I went to the local bookstore, and I got in a magazine that had the foreign cars, classical cars like the MGTs, TCs, and there were a couple of them in the paper that I bought. And that provided me with the money. When I sold them, I had enough money to go to Europe, and that's exactly what I did. I went to London, and by now, the idea of the black man as a god, the idea that we was Muslims before we even came over here, that's rooted. And now I want to see. So the guy who went with me, I said, we're going to drive from London to Africa, and I'm going to find out what the hell is going on, because we was Muslims before we came over. And it all made sense. Slave name, and all that. And I started seriously thinking about that. Then going over there, we drive from London, catch the ferry to Gibraltar, catch another ferry from Gibraltar, Algeciras in Portugal, Gibraltar, and go to Algiers, and then we drive to Tangier. And by the time we get to Tangier, my wife calls me and tells me, you better get back here, because these niggas then went crazy. And they talking about taking you to jail. You didn't ran off with this money. And I said, what? Yeah, that's what they're doing. And I said, okay, well, I'm in Africa now, and it's gonna take me a while to get back. And I mean, when I'll get back, maybe it's a month. In the meantime, I had stopped off in Spain and contracted the guy who owned the shop. At that time, the maxi leather coats were very popular. So I said, I'd like to have this one in red, this one in brown, this one in black, small, medium, and large, and I gave him a deposit. And from that relationship evolved into shipping leather stuff back, because I'm steady trying to exercise these ideas that at that time had merit. And so when I get back to the United States, the brothers come by and I go to the temple. I say, I'll go with you Sunday. I promise you, I'm going. I went to the temple that Sunday and I stood up. I said, yeah, this is it. And they haven't turned back since.
Indeed.
Alhamdulillah.
Wow, that's a heck of a story. I'm sure you were one of the very few blacks at that time that flew outside of the United States. I know.
Well, my connection with the underworld made that possible, because at that time, somebody was taking tickets from United and the rest of those companies, and you pay half price. You could go a round trip.
And this is a point that I find, I know from my own historical documentation and research, that a lot of people do not understand the impact that when they gave the lesser jobs, when immigrants came in, Jews came in, Italians came in, and the way that Americans view foreigners, part of their story is they didn't get the opportunity, so they got the lesser opportunity. So what they did with the lesser opportunity, it's like, okay, you don't want to take out trash? Well, I'm going to take out trash and run all the trash companies. Well, what happened with African Americans is, y'all not going to get proper opportunities, but we'll give you all the opportunities for drugs. And what happened is a lot of the drug dealers are the beginning financiers of legit businesses by African Americans.
Yes.
And if you didn't have that tie to drug dealers, a lot of those drug dealers, people don't understand, those are your brothers, your cousins, the partners you grew up with in school, and they knew you and knew, like, I don't want him to go down the same track that I did, but that's my partner. And I can fund him and give him 10, 20 grand of his drug money. And they turn that into legit businesses.
The real ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Not
all of them.
The ones who were serious about the condition that we found ourselves in. Because I listened to a lot of drug dealers and pimps who told me their story that I didn't necessarily go along with. I understood the logic of why they were in this condition. And only your morality gives you the strength to say, no, I can't do this like this.
Exactly. I'm 100% agree with you on that. I see it. So now you've gone through all this walking. Now you become a Muslim. Now, how does your wife feel about that?
My wife was very typical. Part of it, she was going along with it because she loved me. The part of her submitting to the rules and the regulations, she wrestled with that. And as a result, our marriage broke up because she just did not see, like what the Imam said, you cannot see what you don't have a mind to see. And that's happened in my latest marriage. The same thing. And coupled with, like you said, when we go to the higher educational institutions for the so-called knowledge, there's where we're seduced, thinking that that information is going to empower us. And for the most part, it just sends us down a confused road. And we wound up with some false pride.
Exactly. I agree. I agree. I think there's a lot of things that need to be looked at on that sense of education and what's beneficial and what's not beneficial. There's benefit in it, but we put that benefit as it's almost like worshiping the dollar. Like it gives you a false sense of this is the path that I'm supposed to go down in life, and these things are more important and from other things, and those things are neglected. So I'm right there with you.
You know, the Quran says that about alcohol, there is some good in it, but there's more harm than good.
Exactly.
And I'm not talking about education, but I have a cousin that got a scholarship to go to Stanford, was a student body president of his high school, who now is paralyzed because he couldn't accept the fact that he is not all powerful. Just because you know the axiomatic equation, you understand, that doesn't make that you're invincible and you do what you want.
I agree. I mean, there's plenty of tests out there that people might pass.
It's just, and this is a little bit off the subject momentarily, but I tied into, I've been looking at the YouTube of Minister Farrakhan, and he has a committee that's put together information centered around the secret relationships between blacks and Jews. And brother, I know you will appreciate this. I'm not pushing Minister Farrakhan's program, but I give credit where credit is due. Now, he, to me, is an expert on race relationships, what the white man did to the black man. And historically, it's been documented. But this is the first time that the documentation that he's compiled has come from Jewish rabbis, bankers, educators, who attest to their participation in the slave trade. And he also shows how at the time, like oil is the thing in today's time, cotton was like oil. And us working the cotton fields, that cotton was then taken and shipped up north to his Jewish cousins who had the science of the needle trades. And out of the needle trades, Amir, came hound's tooth, herringbone. Then, when that cotton was spun, it was then shipped to England, and there's where that fabric came. And that whole economy then spread the world, where it's made them rich.
That's an interesting story right there.
That concept, man.
Yeah, that's definitely something to be. I always give credit where credit is due, and he can't take that away from him. People he try to hurt. Stop taking away the good that somebody does. Man. He does a lot of good. You could say you don't believe in the same beliefs as him, but he does a lot of good.
Well, here's what I've discovered through my reading and research. Mr. Farrakhan knows about race relations, and that's what he teaches on. Yakub, black, white, devil, all right? Orphadean is teaching the human nature of Adam and what God had planned for the human being. Those are two different things.
Yes.
You can't teach it if you don't know it.
Exactly.
So when Sultan came here and said that Mr. Farrakhan had appointed him the resident imam, it made sense. Now, I don't know how they're going to patch up that thing, whatever he did that caused the rift. That's between Allah and him. But I know this for a fact, that information they've compiled, that can help us.
Exactly.
Because the pure heart is going to do it and use it in the right way.
Always.
Okay?
Always.
I'm clear, man. I'm clear. And the other part is, since my wife and I have broken up, I have started studying the language of Warfadin Muhammad. Now, this is a little off bar too, but I have to say this because this was important to me the day that it happened. I went to a funeral during the month of Ramadan. And the idea at the funeral was to eat because a person had passed. This is the month of Ramadan. And I saw a brother who I don't know that well, but I know he didn't eat. I didn't either. And I believe that he established that obeying God is more important than rap. And spiritually, I've been close to him ever since then.
Yeah. People don't understand what we do for each other. We're connected in that way. You just, a lot of people, you won't realize it.
You gotta live it.
Exactly. When you reflect on it too, you can, it really, how you feel about somebody and the impact that somebody has made on your life, when you reflect on it a lot, it dawns on you sometimes on how impactful an event or a person has had on you in your own personal development, and nobody can change that. It's already written in stone.
Man, this is real, bro.
I know. I've lived long enough to know a lot of the things you said. We connect in that way. So now, in the Nation of Islam is, who's the leader of the Nation of Islam when you join? Is Elijah Muhammad still alive?
Yeah, Elijah Muhammad's still alive. And I become a photographer, which I'm thinking, in order for me, I want to see the messenger, because I became really prolific in selling Muhammad Speaks newspapers. I sold 1,000 Muhammad Speaks newspapers in 1 week. And from doing that, the brother who sold 1,000 also, I was the president of this profit corporation. He was the secretary. We came in together. He later became the minister because he robbed a dope thing, fell off the roof and broke his leg. He got sentenced 5 years in Soledad prison. He went there, went through that, became the minister of Soledad, got out, and then was a minister after he got out. Became the minister of the San Diego Temple. From there, that's another story.
We don't have to go deep into that one right now, but
Yeah,
there definitely is connection there. Because the Nation of Islam is a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people who came in, not only was it empowering, especially for both African American men and women, but the guys who were the businessmen, the hustlers, the salesmen beforehand, those guys you kind of see. It's not you kind of see. You start rising in degrees in the Nation of Islam because of their whatever they came with prior to coming in.
That didn't happen for me, in my understanding, Amir, until Warfadine came and it reestablished the real value. Because he said it doesn't make sense, it doesn't do you any good for you to manage it, but you're stealing out of the cash register and going to the motel. That began to establish real value to me, because I was under the understanding that part of me said, yeah, by any means necessary. And then you begin to see through that that's not necessarily 100% true. And when he came and reestablished the business and said this footing is going to be right from here, man, the day that he took office and Mr. Farrakhan went to crying, and then he was talking about the winds of emotion ain't gonna affect this house, I said, that's the man right there. Because he provided the impetus to be a man, just like Malcolm did. Malcolm made me proud.
Where were you when Malcolm died? You were in the military still? Because that happened before King.
Yeah, no. I was out of the military, working for a community-based organization to try to get money for students to go to college.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Elijah Muhammad is honorable. Elijah Muhammad is still the leader, and you're selling newspapers now. You stopped being a shoe salesman.
Yeah, when I quit.
Okay, so you quit.
I quit the shoe sales and opened up our own to raise $25,000, and we got additional $25,000 fireman's fund. We opened up a shoe store at the Eastmont Mall that had the fire truck in it.
Mm-hmm.
Then bringing in the Friends of the Nation of Islam and the Bean Pie newspaper, that infuriated the shareholders. I stopped that and then went and joined the Nation of Islam.
And started selling those newspapers. So now,
yeah,
as you're building up your prestige in what you're doing, Elijah Muhammad passed.
Yeah.
And what's going through your mind, and what as that process is going on, and Imam Muhammad takes the leadership, what happens to you?
What happened to me is, in that process of selling the newspapers, minister from Santa Barbara, he and his brother, come to Oakland, and they want to open up the Oakland Temple. I transferred from San Francisco to the Oakland Temple, and we then began to look for properties to establish a temple. One in Oakland, one in West Oakland. And what came as a result of that was, Minister came to me, and because by this time I'm painting.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm into photography. And so the minister says, I want to have a bazaar, and I'd like to see if you would get some advertising. So I said, yeah, because I know there's a local billboard place here that I'll go and talk with. So I called up the billboard company and I asked the guy, I said, we're Muhammad's Temple, and we don't get donations, we get donations to buy pencils and paper for our kids. We have a school. So the guy says, yeah, I'll be happy to help you. As a matter of fact, have you got somebody in your organization that can draw a sign or whatever it is that you want to advertise? And I said, yeah, I can get somebody. And so he says, well, if you would do that, that will save me for having to pay time and a half to my people. So I said, okay. Well, I couldn't find anybody. So I said, okay, I'm going. So I go and look at his operation. And in one day, he takes me to a 6,000 square foot warehouse, pitch black. At the table, just like there, is an opaque projector. And he said, did you bring your artwork? I said, yes, sir. Well, on this wall, he had 24 by 36 sheets of paper that covered the whole wall. He puts the little drawing that I drew up, son, what's called Earth Shaking Bazaar. Projects that up on the wall. And then I go and trace on these pieces of paper.
All right, so let me know about the sewing machine.
All right, I just, I had knowledge of the sewing machines from my mother. And at that time, Oakland, they had a lot of Asian community that provided the sweatshops. And there were a lot of rental places. You could call them and rent a sewing machine for $100. And that's what I did. And I put a story together that, I'm putting together a dress line and this and that and this and that. And the people delivered it, showed me how to thread it, and I took it from there. I was already silk screening that line drawing on t-shirts. So I just had a bigger one made, but there are branches to this story, because to have the silk screen made, I had to know somebody who worked for a company that did it for me for free. Because I had to pay for this stuff, I would have never got to first base. So because I knew different people, they enabled me to continue on with my pursuit of my imagination, I'll put it like that. And the most rewarding thing that has come out as the highlight, one of the highlights is, like I've sold my work to Herbie, and that's another story. He came to town to the Berkeley Jazz Festival, and I had painted this painting of him, and I had kept it all day, hidden, covered. And then at the end of the concert, I picked it up, and he looked at it, and he pointed to me, motioned me to come, worked it out, and he bought the painting. And I did that with McCoy Tyner, with Bill Withers. Bill Withers' manager, his wife, and my mother, her mother, my mother were best friends. And so when I told her that I had painted a painting of Bill Withers, how that came was Earth, Wind and Fire, Philip Bailey's sister is the one who really taught me about photography. Got me to get a camera, start photographing my own paintings instead of painting other people's stuff. And I said, yeah. Well, I fly to Los Angeles with her for the Pointer Sisters was appearing at the Troubadour. And Bill Withers' debut, he opened up for the Pointer Sisters. So I had a camera, I took some pictures of Bill Withers, and when it was all over, I painted this painting of him. Now, when I get back 2 or 3 years pass, and now this lady is married to the manager of Bill Withers. And so I tell her, hey, I got a painting of Bill Withers, I'm sure you'd like it. And so she says, I'd like to see it. Well, I take it to her, she takes it to him, boom, he buys the painting. Now, he sends me a letter, thank you, it's nice, and this. 20 years ago by. I'm looking at Netflix, and in the entertainment thing, I see Ray Charles, so I said, let me check this out. Well, next to the selection of Ray Charles is a thing of Bill Withers. So I forego Ray Charles, I hit Bill Withers, and it turns out that Bill Withers is having an interview. It starts in his basement, and he's walking upstairs to his living room, And when he gets to his living room up here, there's a painting of him. And I said, man, wait a minute. That looks like the painting. So I called my son and I said, Muhammad, is there any way that you can blow this picture up to where I can see whether that's a photograph or that's a painting? Because that looks like the painting I sold Bill Willis. He said, yeah, Dad. And he hits the button and it blows it up. And as it gets close and I see it, I said, man, that's the painting that I sold Bill Willis 40 years ago. So personally, the fame and the fortune that I was pursuing, thought, Allah has personally let me know, man, you don't have to be famous. You don't have to be rich. He acknowledged the effort that I put forth. All praise is due to Allah. Alhamdulillah.
And I think, if you get that far in life, where you can get to that point, where you can accept that and you understand that life has a bigger meaning than all of your pursuits, I think that's the highest. You can't get higher than that.
Well, that's why he brought me here. Allah guided me to you, man. What you're doing is more important than anything in my life right now. I don't mean to talk about our community here, but I ain't feeling it. And when I talk to different people here, Oakland, same thing, man. Same thing. And it can be neat. I ain't backbiting and all, but it's like in photography, man. You know what an overexposure is. And sometimes I feel I've been overexposed because I feel trapped. I got some ideas, but so what? I don't have the money. I done messed up my credit to do something. But I'm still coming. This is the latest thing, Amir. I am into clothes, fashion. So, my name is Ronald Umrani. My father told me this a long time ago, you cannot see, but you don't have a mind to see. That's what Walter Dean said. I wasn't seeing. But what gives you vision? And I discovered, Allah let me see that faith gives you vision. The absence of things not seen. So, the idea comes that why don't you do something that you've been doing all along, but then get paid for it? And that is, open you up a vintage shop, because I'm into old clothes, old cars, old furniture, old this. It doesn't make any difference. I recognize the period of the Harlem Renaissance was the glory period, where the artists, designers, the poets, playwrights, top of the line, all of that is top. So I said, okay, well, that's what I want to do. And since I've been in Georgia, I've been collecting. I have been collecting, Amir, collecting. This is a photograph, you probably recognize it. It's by James Vanderzee, 1930, during the Harlem Renaissance.
I just lost it.
Oh, it's all the way at the bottom.
You got this photo?
No.
Yeah, I recognize it.
Okay. Now, I'm going to use that as my logo for producing the clothes that they don't necessarily have to be vintage, but in that vicinity. This. And the place is going to be called, where you can find this at rag.land. But the difference is, these clothes, you know anything about, you ever studied music?
Mm-hmm.
So you know what a D major 7th chord is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The clothes represents the notes to a chord that produces a color. So when you dress up, you're wearing colors. Those elements are like the scale.
Wow, that's deep. That is deep. That's connecting a lot of things together on that one.
Man, man.
Hey, that's you. I guess you got it, man. That means it never stopped.
Praise be to
Alhamdulillah.
Allah. I never stopped praying. And guess what's happening to me now? At 1:33, the angels are waking me up.
Alhamdulillah.
And I'm getting up making time, man. And it's scaring me. Scaring me. Because I think I'm on the right track.
Alhamdulillah.
In spite of all this other madness, man. In spite of all this madness. So going to the Dominican Republic was something I said, this is it. This is the spot right here. I ain't into the sex. That's the pitfall to take you to hell. But I am interested in finding me a decent woman who loves God the way I do. And finally, raising me a family that loves God the way that I do. Now, I'm hope to die wanting to do that.
Hey, you'll get it. Anything you strive to achieve, you will get.
Man can only have that which he strives for.
Exactly. Well, I'm gonna end it on that one. You know? This was excellent.